Good afternoon and warmly welcome to everybody to this seminar that the Swedish government is so happy to launch together with the Commission, European Union Commission. My name is Malin Ekman-Alden and I just was commissioned to try to monitor this session, and I'll do my best. I didn't have a lot of preparation time, but I think together with you all. And I am so happy we have a very distinguished panel with us today, and that you will have the opportunity to listen to. And we will have a key speech from Commissioner Helena Dalli, which we'll start with very, very soon. Just to make sure you are at the right side event, today we are discussing national strategies for implementation of the CRPD, and how they can make a difference and how they can be applied to really be efficient tools in ensuring that rights of persons with disability are developed in reality in different countries. And we have the opportunity to discuss this issue from 3 different levels. We will have my colleague here from the UN that will present some issues on global level, and Commissioner Dalli, obviously, on regional level. And we will have some national examples from Sweden also, which I try to give together with my colleague from civil society, Ms. Marina Karlsson. But I think we will start promptly because we are already a bit delayed. Please, Commissioner Dalli, would you like to start?
Thank you, Malin, and thank you for organizing this event. When I took up office as European Commissioner in 2019, one of my first tasks was to develop a new 10-year strategy on disability rights. I, of course, widely consulted with member states, EU institutions, and civil society organizations, including organizations of persons with disabilities, of course, on the gaps, challenges, and possible actions necessary for full participation of persons with disabilities in society. And we built on the lessons of the previous strategy. That broad consultation and stock-taking laid solid groundwork for a comprehensive, coherent, and impactful European strategy adopted in 2021, anchored in the rights enshrined in the UN Convention. Once the strategy is in place, implementation requires all relevant players to be fully engaged. Our strategy is a joint tool with member states and with civil society to improve the lives of persons with disabilities in Europe and strengthen their rights. It calls for commitment on many levels: public, private, European, national, regional, and local. Joining up forces with civil society is essential, as they are best placed to take the pulse of the situation on the ground. A guiding principle in our strategy is nothing about persons with disabilities without them. And the European Commission counts on this engagement to make this strategy a reality. Both the EU and all 27 EU member states are parties to the UN Convention, and their respective competences in different policy areas mean that only together, through concerted action and cooperation, can we fully deliver the necessary transformation for an inclusive society. Our strategy involves many sectors of intervention and diverse areas of policy to promote full participation on as many levels as possible, such as political life, employment, education, and culture. In all these dimensions, a key enabling factor is accessibility of the built environment, transport, information, and digital technologies. Policies and laws can only be effective if fully understood by all those who need to implement them. This can be achieved in several ways: learning from good practices, exchanging with experts, capacity building, and increasing coherence of action at different levels are key. These are the objectives of the recently launched Accessible EU Resource Centre, one of the flagship initiatives under the strategy. Accessible EU will facilitate the implementation of EU accessibility law and policy through collaboration between EU and its member states, knowledge sharing and training. Monitoring of a strategy is, of course, essential to take stock of progress and to adjust implementation to ensure the greatest impact. Building on previous experience, the European Commission set up a framework to monitor progress in implementing our strategy. Effective monitoring depends on quality data, together with long-term research. The European Commission is supported by its statistical department, Eurostat, to obtain survey data. Until now, data has not been available for all relevant policy areas, and data is not always collected frequently enough to identify trends. So to close those gaps, the European Commission is reinforcing data collection, including data on persons living in institutions. Persons with disabilities' right to live independently and be included in the community can only be realized if a full range of person-centered community-based services are in place. The European Commission will present this year guidance on independent living and inclusion in the community to provide member states additional support as they transition from institutional to community-based solutions for persons with disabilities. Improved data collection will help us develop a full picture of the situation and better identify needs. On that basis, we can shape our guidance. We are determined to maximize the impact of our European strategy for the rights of persons with disabilities. To that end, continuous monitor accompanies the rollout of the numerous actions of this strategy. And we cooperate with member states and civil society in the design of our actions to optimize their added value and future take-up across the EU. I hope that our experience in the design, implementation, and monitoring of the strategy can help others in their efforts to turn the Convention into reality. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Dalli. I think this was an excellent start and key overarching speech on how our region is actually taking on the broad perspective of the rights of the the CRPD rights. And I think as a part of the European Union, we are also, Sweden is very much looking forward to be part of the initiative taken by European Union. And I think they are also strengthening us on a national level. And obviously, the European Union is also a really important arena for collaboration, but also to exchange of experience. And I hope this is, as you say, is applicable to many regions in the world. So thank you so much for starting up today. And we are very happy that you are here with us today, but I think you have a very busy schedule and will need to leave us in some time, so just so everybody knows. But from this really good overarching, like a title of this whole subject, we will now go into more operative details, I think, and see how can this be carried out from different aspects. And one important aspect talking about strategies is obviously that it's not only making exclusive strategies focusing on disability, but disability also needs to be mainstreamed as a perspective, as a perspective into other groups, because no one is only a disabled person. They are also woman or man, or they are in different social situations, they have different ages. So that is also a key thing to ensure that other organizations taking another entry point into right-based questions also introduce disability as a part. And I think UN Women is one excellent example that has really developed their work on on disability since the CRPD was introduced. And we are really happy to have a colleague here from UN Women, Mr. Let's see if I can express your name, Moranjul Kabir, and you are a senior global advisor on gender equality. And would you please give us some keys on how you are introducing disability into your work?
Thank you very much. And thank you also for the Swedish Mission and EU for inviting UN Women. You know, sometimes when people ask, I try to draw a parallel of exactly the disability movement is now where gender movement was post-Beijing, 1995, when you have a lot of gender-specific projects, but then the challenges of mainstreaming was everywhere. And then people would say, okay, there is a gender focal point in a ministry, with the government, with UN agencies, and everything will be lumped onto, it's typically her, of course, because it's gender, so it has to be women. And then there would be no resources, and sometimes little bit of resources, sometimes very, very separate standalone projects. And since 1995, when the world has taken note and Beijing Platform for Action happened, and it significantly changes, although I'm not drawing the same parallel with gender movement, but there were whole issues of mainstreaming, as you were saying, whether we should do it separately, standalone, or should we mainstream it. When you speak about universal design, people often talk about cost, but you know, if you really adopt the principle by heart and endorse it from the beginning, your cost would not be the same issue when people start thinking about always a separate. Now, for UN Women, I'm focusing on a little bit of global strategies as your title, but also trying to show that the link with national strategies a little bit. And there comes also for UN system, UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, as Secretary General Guterres promoted, which has a deep impact in the UN system as well. On the first UN Women strategy on disability inclusion, particularly looking at girls and women with disabilities, we launched it in 2018. And since then, this strategy has quite a bit of rippling impact on UN Women. It was not easy because it's a gender entity, and people sometimes are looking for competing resource, competing attention, right? But it made an impact, the strategy. Let me give very specific example. So the inclusion of disaggregation by disability status has been incorporated in UN Women strategic plan in a number of areas. So now we look at the disaggregated data, which is extremely important if you look for data. And we saw that firsthand in 2020 when COVID-19 hits, and suddenly we realized that we don't have any data, and whole issues of access to health services becomes paramount. Secondly, it also increased in the number of UN Women offices reporting disability inclusion work, and the way they are partnering with organizations of persons with disabilities, particularly women-led organizations. Because within gender movement, within disability movement, you have also issues of gender, right? So you have women who are typically taking a backseat in that movement, and UN Women is trying to promote. And one of the challenge for UN Women in many offices is how can we bring gender and disability movement also closer? Because it also depends on personality, it also depends on organic sort of initiative on both way. So that's one thing that it really impacted. And then we sort of adapted, I would say, a twin track approach, or more than twin track. One is this targeted initiative. Secondly, mainstreaming approach. And thirdly, inclusive management. Because what we also figured out that if you have a leadership at UN Women office, maybe a country office, maybe a program presence, maybe a project, if you have a project leader who has understanding of accessibility, who have understanding of inclusion, then it goes a long way. Think about the UN producing a lot of knowledge product across the world, and how accessible are they? And we try to sort of tell people that it doesn't matter that how many publication you are trying to reach to people through which, but you also see how many people are not included in your planning for distribution. And this is not only UN problem, it's member states issue, it's IFI's issues, it's World Bank issues. On March 8, I joined World Bank DC, and they're launching the operational strategy for disability inclusion, which is a very, very good thing, because that impacted a lot on the member states and the sectoral ministries in terms of the way bank and other IFIs work. Secondly, very briefly, moderator, let me know how much time I have. I'm done already.
Well, maybe a few minutes.
Okay, yeah. Sure, 2-3 minutes. So I will just look at the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. That was launched in 2019, just immediately before COVID, right? And what was one of the first series of thing we published as the UN system is, of course, the impact of COVID, the violence against women, and then we realized that the whole issue of access to health was seen as more technical issue. And organic relationship with WHO and other UN entities didn't happen at the programming level the way it should have happened. It was more at the WHO working at the technical level, at the fine knowledge level, at the health ministry, at the hospitals, but not necessarily in the mainstreaming programming. So since COVID learning, a lot of work are happening. And I think one of the credit goes to UN Disability Inclusion Strategy, because it opened up resident coordinators when come to New York for a global meeting with Secretary General, and there was, of course, dedicated session on UN Disability Inclusion Strategy as a priority. And that impacted at two levels. One is at the UN city, at the country level, where UN operates. Also at the entity level, where each of our organizations respond to executive office in terms of how we are implementing. There are 15 indicators, including leadership, capacity development, program, strategic plan, you name it, and accessibility. And some of the area, it's a self-assessment process, and some of the areas we are not doing well. But I think that is a good thing. And when I look at across the UN entities, I see a lot of humble admission, which is always better to admit and then define your baseline. And as a result of this twin strategy at the institutional level and at the UN level, a lot of our work with member states, with partners, are really impacted. And the last thing I want to mention is in terms of our work with Organization of Persons with Disabilities has significantly increased, both as a partner, but also as some organization we look forward to learn from them as well, because in many areas, UN are not necessarily top-notch in terms of some of the knowledge and contribution they can make it. And the final point I just mentioned, that on the area of intersectionality, both gender, disability, gender, ethnicity, gender, LGBTIQ, and disability, this is an area where UN is still struggling in terms of SDG implementation, because we are very good when there is a defined vulnerability, but challenges becomes when you are talking about indigenous population living in rural areas, maybe LGBTIQ or maybe linguistic minority. It's very difficult for UN system to respond, and as well as my member state. That is our experience. And that is something we are really looking forward to sharpening. I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a very humble and very comprehensive presentation of how you've taken on the questions of disability. And I think that really shows that when talking about strategies to implement the CRPD, it's really important also using other entry points to really combine competencies. But I'm sure that it is also a way of expanding the knowledge and the quality of the work of, in your case, women's rights. So in that way, sometimes in the debate you would argue that it's not space enough for new right issues, but this is really proving that it's not about like competing about space. It's more like broadening the perspective because women, just as people with disabilities, are in different situations with different possibilities. So I think thank you so much for that. Yes. And we will move on. And I think when you talk about implementation of the CRPD and how the convention is structured, it's very dynamic, and it's very dynamic in the sense that it's just as the whole human rights system. It's always the dynamics and the combination of the states, the formal states, and the civil society working together with the different perspectives, different aspects. And when joining and coming together, sometimes not always sharing the views, but that is a really dynamic that is like putting things forward. And I think also in the European Union, work of the European Union, that is also something that is very clearly part of the strategy and also part of your daily work. And now we will listen to two representatives from having these kind of different aspects, working with the strategy that Commissioner Dalli just presented to us. So please, I would like to welcome, I have to use my papers to know the names right here. Miss Katarina Ivankovic. You are working in the Commission, and you will give one perspective, and you are working very closely with the European Disability Forum. So after you will come a representative from the civil society. So please, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, and thank you for inviting us to take a part in this very important panel. I can just tell you, when Commissioner Dalli was speaking, I had a flashback from the past, because Commissioner said to us, because we are a service who are supposed to deliver on the policies, she said, I want a very concrete strategy. I want a strategy with a solid time frame, very ambitious, that will have a big impact on life of persons with disabilities. You have to take all the... Exactly, I'm saying. You have to take I'm getting goosebumps right now, but you have to take on board all the articles of the CRPD, and you have to do it in a way that you promote disability mainstreaming throughout the Commission policies and the work that we are undertaking. You also said something, beside putting the obligations for the Commission, take a look into what the member states can do and how can we partner together. So these were the tasks that were given to us by Commissioner Dalli in the beginning of the work. And I do believe that we have managed to deliver. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
I want to thank you for that, because you really listened well and you really delivered. So thank you. But now I have to go to another one.
Good. Many thanks. So indeed, what we've done, when you take a look at the European strategy for the rights of the persons with disabilities, I really believe that you can see a very ambitious document, a document that has a vision, and this vision is, I would like to say, somehow in line with what you were just pointing out. It is that disability needs to be fully mainstreamed in all the policies and the activities that European Commission is undertaking, be it in the area of transport, in the area of human rights, health, social rights, employment, be it in those areas that do not seem so obvious, like activities relevant to space or to water or to environment, to energy poverty, all the different aspects. And that's actually what we did in the European Union. Based on the strategy, we have established a network of disability focal points. So each institution, including also the external institutions, meaning EU delegations and the missions and the representations across the world, they have appointed disability coordinators. All of these disability coordinators work together in order to implement the different aspects of the strategy. What we have also done under the leadership of Helena Dalli is that we established the Equality Task Force within our Secretariat General. And in this Equality Task Force, all the DGs have so-called equality coordinators. Sometimes they overlap. A disability coordinator is also equality coordinator, but in some institutions they are different persons. Why is this important? This is important because we also tried to address in the same manner as the UN the intersectionality. We see that intersectionality is more and more prominent in our societies, And we see that there is no single characteristic that a person could be judged or put in a position or discriminated against. So what we did with 6 equality strategies in the EU, European Union, we have 6 equality strategies, from gender equality, children's rights strategy, to Roma, general anti-discrimination strategy, LGBTI plus and QI plus strategy, and then the disability rights strategy. So in each of these strategic frameworks, we have included the intersectionality chapters and the provisions. One may argue that, is this sufficient? One may also argue, is this always taken on board? But the fact that these strategies and services have to report what are they doing in these respects shows that there is at least high level of understanding what intersectionality is, and hopefully high level of understanding in implementing the policies that are relevant also for persons with disabilities. Now, before I close, I will just like maybe to mention few deliverables. The EU strategy has 64 actions, and we have 7 so-called flagship actions. And the flagship actions are practically the game changers, be it the disability platform, that for the first time we brought together all 27 focal points from a different member states, UNCRPD focal points, civil society and other stakeholders. We have, I believe, more than 10 representatives of the civil society in the disability platform. They meet regularly, they discuss, they sometimes argue, but in the end they get to the right conclusion. One flagship that has been already implemented and is implemented and very relevant for the topics of this COSP as well is the Disability Employment Package. Disability Employment Package was something that we saw should have a big impact on those persons with disabilities who are either to enter the labor market or already in the labor market, in order to make sure that their skills are adequately addressed, in order to make sure that employers understand what the reasonable accommodation is, what additional requirements persons with disabilities do have, not just to have a higher table or lower table or whatever else, the whole concept of the reasonable accommodation. Also to help persons with disabilities to find their place in the education, but even more important, in the labor market. There are 2 initiatives that are coming later, that will be adopted later this year. One we see as a real game changer, and that will be the European Disability Card. By this card, we will have a situation that we do not have at this stage in the European Union, and that is the mutual recognition between EU 27 of the disability status of the persons. So the holders of the disability card will have their disability recognized in each member state, in 27 member states. And by this card, they will also have some rights when it comes to access to services, be it private, be it public, be it for the remuneration or without remuneration. And we do think that this is really the right way forward when it comes to free movement of persons with disabilities within the European Union. The other initiative that is now being prepared is the guidelines on independent living. I believe all of you here know and are aware how important the independence and how important independent living is. We are all fortunate to have Article 19 of the Convention that has put this topic so highly on high on the agenda. And by this guidance, we want to, first of all, guide and show to member states what is relevant when discussing the independent living, which rules, which aspects need to be respected. And then also we want to show how to successfully use EU funding in order to address the independent living and how to support persons with disabilities. I can immediately tell you that the main access when it comes to independent living will be on, first of all, access to services. be it in the form of the personal assistance or some other type of services that could be considered home services or community-based services. And also what we want in the European Union, we want to step up transition from any form of institution to the independent living. That is our main objective. And we do believe that all our member states are fully aware of this importance. We have done a lot. Some might say you have done the most out of all the countries, but we are still not there. We still need a lot of work, and our member states needs a lot of support when it comes to the independent living. So I apologize if I was a bit long. I'm not going into the other 60 plus actions and flagships, but very happy that I'm able to share with you our ideas and thoughts and how we take the disability within the European Commission, and not only Commission, because we have our disability coordinators and disability experts in all the other EU institutions, in the European Parliament, in our Economic and Social Committee and Committee of Region, also in the Council. And this is how we see, this is actually how we empower our colleagues who are dealing with disability to be more visible, more prominent, and give them this necessary political strength and weight that everyone who is dealing with the topic needs to have in order to be successful in his or her job. So many thanks.
Thank you so much. We got a really good picture of some of the priorities, but also some of the operative and also the amount of different things you need to do when implementing a strategy on in a regional organization like the European Union with all its different angles and bodies and structures. So very interesting. Thank you so much. And we have Ms. Gunta Anka, my old friend from the European Disability Forum. You're the vice president of the forum. And you are working also almost on a daily basis, I think, together with the Commission on implementing the strategy. And I think we are really interested to listen to your perspective on this. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Please. Yeah. Turn on. It's on. It's on. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Malin, and thank you for a possibility to be here and speak with you. You know, when I'm sitting here, I just get my very old memories. I get my very old memories from the end of the last century. And at the end of the last century, when my small country, Latvia, became independent, I had a meeting with our Ministry of Welfare, and together with Ministry, we decided we need a strategy. And then we write a really nice strategy about our dreams, I would say. And at the end, when we had this absolutely nice strategy, and I was so happy about it, and we have started to think about the best way how to implement it, we understood that we didn't put anything what we really need there. We don't have any resources, we don't have any timelines, we don't have anything there, and it was like a dream. Now, when we are talking about European disability strategy, is absolutely different, and that's why I'm really happy about it. In 2019, when the mandate of Commission was ended, we in European Disability Forum were quite disappointed. We're quite disappointed because we know that the strategy finished as 2020, and we didn't know what's going to be now, what kind of commissioner is going to come, what kind of strategies will be developed. And then we are happy to have the Commissioner of Equality who really made the changes and who really made this strategy we are quite happy and quite proud on. That is the strategy of the rights of persons with disability, 2021-2030. What I'd like to stress are some, I would say, important points from our point of view, what we would like to stress according to this strategy. The first and the most important point was that persons with disabilities and our organization was involved in the development of the strategy. And of course, for us, it gives the possibility to put, as I said, our dreams in a quite realistic way. The strategy follows CRPD, and it's very important because, as you know, EU is part of the CRPD and ratifies CRPD as a group of the countries. It's important also to understand that this strategy couldn't be that kind of declaration. There is included time bounding, schedule, there is budget for a strategy, and there is monitoring of the strategy. And those are points I would like to highlight again and again, because without it, any good strategy isn't possible at all. At the moment, strategy, even if it's still 2030, will be finished like a first phrase in 2024, and that gives us a possibility from our point of view, evaluate the situation and to see how it works. When we are talking about resources, I would like also to stress that we are not talking only about budget. We are talking much more broader. It's about human resources, professionals who really will be able to implement such kind of strategy. It's about people with disability organizations, not only on European level, but also on national level, because those organizations should be able to follow, to monitor, and to really give a good advice or expertise on a best way how to implement that strategy. We are happy that some kind of mechanism is made for the implementation of a strategy. There are dedicated bodies and structure, and Katerina told about it, so I'm not going to go in it anymore. We also have this disability platform. A disability platform is a kind of mechanism where member states, civil society, and European Commission come together to meet and to talk not only about achievements, but also about the problems and about the best way how you can solve those problems together. We are very happy that many institutions are involved in the implementation of strategy, but still we feel sometimes a bit worried about some of them, like for example, Council of the EU, because as you know, each member state should vote for any kind of initiatives to get it through, and we have quite a lot of bad examples when one or maybe two member states are not happy about some initiatives, and they are just somewhere, I would say, under the table for more than 10 years even. So we should find the best way how we can change this situation. But at the end, I'd like to say that the most important part of each strategy is political will, because only political will is something which could change the situation. Political will of those who are in European Parliament, political will of commissioners, political will of each member state. Otherwise, we can't change anything. And I would like to say thank you to Sweden for organizing this event, because it's very important to start to talk more and more about it, to get the same level in the implementation of the rights of people with disabilities in all member states of European Union. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anka, and thank you for really concluding the key elements of a successful strategy. I don't think that would really be relevant in all parts of the world, which you were explaining. Obviously, the infrastructure and the resources and the cultural context are different depending on where we live, but the key elements you are expressing are really needs to be in place. So thank you very much for that. And I will now take the floor for some minutes to start up a discussion on a national example from the Swedish point of view. Sweden is one member of the European Union, obviously, and I think Sweden is also a country that has, during a number of years, benefited a lot from the different initiatives that has been taken within the Union in the field of the implementation of CRPD. And even before the CRPD was in place, there were initiatives that have made a difference also on national level. As you know, the competence is shared between the European Union and the member states in many areas with great importance on persons with disabilities. But just to give you a brief brief understanding on how the work is carried out in Sweden, talking about strategies, and I will be followed by my colleague Marina, who is sitting there. So I am on daily basis the Director General for a Swedish agency called the Agency of Participation. We are a government agency, and in Sweden the office of the government is rather limited and very focused on policy issue, and the operative work of the ministry is really delegated to different government agencies. And there are big ones and there are small ones like us, and we are the agency mainly involved in implementing the policy of disability in Sweden, just to explain where I come from. So let me give you some experience from the Swedish point of view. The Swedish disability policy, that in its last format was passed by the Parliament in 2017, is very clearly based on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. You may say that the national policy is the Swedish instrument of implementing the CRPD within the Swedish context. So we don't have any additional strategy for that purpose. There is a national goal in the policy, and it is, very loosely translated, to achieve equitable living conditions and full participation in a diverse society for people with disability, with a special emphasis on children and gender equality. So that is the goal or the vision, or however you would like to put it. And after the goal, there is also, in line with the convention, appointed four key elements that needs to be provided to ensure good implementation. And these four, I think you will recognize them as we are here in the UN, in the CRPD context, is the principle of universal design, promoting accessibility, individualized services supports, and to prevent and combat discrimination. These are key elements that the policy is really based on. And a fifth thing I think is very important, coming directly from the CRPD, is also the key element that to ensure the only way really to be successful in implementing the rights of persons with disability is also to ensure that they are involved in all parts of the process. I think we are usually using that old phrase, nothing for us without us. I think that is really coming from that. But it's also a key instrument with actually in political implementation that needs strategies. It's not only talk. And that is also very clear in the policy. To increase the pace and the impact of the policy, the government of Sweden in 2021 passed a new strategy. It's a 10-year strategy. And then 30 different government agencies were specially commissioned to be like the drivers of this strategy. And it was also appointed 12 key societal areas that should be especially prioritized in the work. And they are, I shall not tell all of them, but they are really key areas like employment, legal provision, transport, very broad. And the agency of participation where I work was also commissioned to ensure that there was a strong monitoring of the work of the strategy, but maybe more important, also to support the different actors involved on the different levels where they were working, trying to ensure that they got good support to be able to actually carry out what they were asked by the government. And this is obviously, with 30 different actors in so many different fields, of quite a challenging task, but very, very important to actually ensure a success of the strategy. The strategy is ongoing, and the government has said that the first part of the work, which is going on now, it's very much focused on to ensure that we are gathering enough knowledge and data on the situation of persons with disabilities to ensure that we later on, maybe around 2026, can actually point what are the key factors that need to be put in an action plan to ensure that the rights of persons with disability are really efficiently strengthened. So we are still in the phase of actually trying to increase knowledge together with our colleagues in these 30 different agencies. I can say that I think some people have already raised the issue. This is a very important thing to do, but it's quite challenging, not only because it's quite a broad field, but also because we also in Sweden have quite a serious lack of data in many areas that can really describe how people with disabilities are affected by different by different sectors. So this is something that is also a specific issue to focus on the strategy to ensure that this data is developed and used in a more efficient way to ensure that it actually reveals the situation of persons with disabilities and when rights are violated or even when discrimination occurs. And in the strategy is also the issue of active involvement is also a key element, and all the different agencies are clearly appointed to ensure that they have an ongoing dialogue with the disability organization, and they should also yearly report on how this dialogue has been carried out, but not only that, also how have they used the result of the dialogue in the development of the work. So a very important issue. We are the Agency of Participation is appointed to yearly present a report to the government on the development of the strategy, and we have very recently passed the third one since the strategy was passed. And let me try to give you some examples of findings we are doing. I think the good story is really that all the different actors supported in the strategy is taking the responsibility, and they are taking it seriously, and they have all started to do something in accordance with the strategy. They are obviously, because they're on very different levels and also approaching from different angles, doing it also very differently and are doing different priorities in what they should start with prioritizing. Quite a few is more focused on actually develop their internal work. We talk about websites, maybe accessible offices, maybe the recruitment policies, that kind of things. Fewer still have the opportunity to actually use the strategy to change what the delivery to the citizens of Sweden, to be a bit frank. That step is obviously quite a challenge for many of them to actually use the experience, the knowledge they are gaining from the strategy and do something about it in their ordinary work. That is still to be developed. We can also see that, talking about active implementation, almost all of the agencies involved in the strategies are actually having dialogue with the civil society and especially with disability organizations. They're doing it in different ways. They have quite a broad way of using the dialogue, but most of them are actually struggling in taking the dialogue and use it for concrete development of their work. So that is still something that they need to work on within the strategy. In general, when you talk about living conditions, because as I said, that was the vision of the policy, we can still see that the living conditions of persons with disabilities in Sweden is very different from living conditions for other groups, and there is a great gap. And this is also, as I think most countries of the world, there are also challenges, factors in the development now, with economic challenges, with high inflation, that kind of things, that really threats to even worsen the situation for vulnerable groups within the disability community. Also factors like gender, age, so on, is also affecting people with disability and increasing the gap in living conditions. So we do have a number of challenges to work on, and therefore I believe the strategy is a very important tool to have and to continue working with. So that was a brief presentation on the strategy from my point of view. But as I said, my colleague Marina, who is working for people with disabilities daily and have a lot of knowledge about the daily situation living with a disability, what would you say? What's your view on the same topic, please?
Thank you, Malin. Dear all, thank you for the possibility to speak here today. My name is Marina, and I'm a board member of the Swedish Disability Rights Federation, the advocate for rights of persons with disabilities, and we are part of the civil society. We have a vision, society for all, including diversity and intersectionality. We advocate inclusive and participatory processes. We engage in dialogue with political decision makers and authorities, as Malin described. We raise awareness, and our work aims to strengthen the rights of persons with disabilities. In our role coordinating civil society reporting on the implementation of the UN CRPD and strategies, we have been active in preparing constructive and concrete recommendations to the state for national strategies and reports to the UN. In 2019, we coordinated the work to analyze the national implementation of the 33 first articles of the CRPD. The report, Respect for Rights, was made in parallel to the state report with answers to the list of issues prior to reporting. 110 civil society organizations endorsed the 134 recommendations that we follow up on a yearly basis. We also gave very concrete recommendations for the national strategy, asking for alignment with the CRPD and Agenda 2030. I would like to raise 3 issues today of great importance to the Disability Rights Federation. First, active and meaningful involvement of representative organizations must be working for decisions on the top level, where decisions are made on legislation, policy, budget, and financing. This is part of Article 4, general obligations that need to work systematically, but also coordinated on regional and local government. Second, the work to research, coordinate, and verify recommendations from the representative organizations need to be included in decisions about concrete measures. In General Comment 7, there is guidance to states about funding, training, accessibility, and feedback that need follow-up. We need explanations and feedback on how recommendations were included in the decisions, when and if recommendations from organizations of persons with disabilities are not considered. We also need to know why. Third, recommendations from the UN constructive dialogue need to be implemented in a systematic, inclusive, and coordinated way, with political decisions on concrete actions, budget, and deadlines. Last year, we started dialogue in a small group with the government and the civil society to prepare a proposal for a new process inspired by practical guidance from the UN on how to move national mechanisms for reporting and follow-up from ad hoc to a systematic approach. The work was paused, but we hope that it will continue. The challenge is to move beyond fair words to concrete and meaningful involvement of representative organizations in decisions that have real positive outcomes for the rights of persons with disabilities. We have been going in the opposite directions with budget constraints, we hope we won't forget the pledge to leave no one behind in the process. Together, we have to take on challenges and good examples, look ahead and strengthen all parts of the UN CRPD and the strategies of the rights for persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina. And I think you gave a great picture of the importance of actually having this kind of dynamics between US organizations of people with disabilities and we as public agencies commissioned actually trying to move the development further from the political point of view. So thank you so much. I think we have, thank you so much to all the panel. We have a few minutes now to very few though, to maybe ask a question or two. I don't know how much time there will be. But actually we have had one person in this room. I don't know who you are, but I know that you come from the other part of the world, looking from Scandinavia. You're from New Zealand. And I think you would like to do an intervention on this topic of strategies. So you are welcome, wherever you sit, please.
Kia koutou katoa. I'm Paula Tesarera. I'm the Chief Executive of our new Ministry of Disabled People, which is named Whaikaha. So in New Zealand, we have had a strategy and action plan around persons with disabilities for some time now. And I think the observations that we would make around maximising the impact, and I think many of these things have been noted, but good engagement, real genuine co-design of the strategy with disabled people, outcomes that can be measured, so the data and evidence to back those up, being brave enough to gather and report the data, even if the data tells a picture that we don't necessarily like to see or want to see. A strategy that does not focus on what needs to be achieved, but how the outcomes will be achieved, and then an action plan to progress the strategy, monitoring and public reporting, and a strategy to support that with the government of the day. So many of those things have been said. I think the question that I would have for panellists or indeed anyone with particular experience in the room is, are you aware of any effective levers where strategies or actions have not been acted upon, what the levers are to generate the change that's needed? So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Mission of Sweden for hosting this.
Thank you so much. I think we have time, 1 minute, to one of the panelists maybe to comment on the questions. Would anybody like to? Yes, please, Katarina.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I believe you struck the right point. What does it make a strategy to be successful or not? And although many policymakers do not always necessarily like to discuss about indicators and targets and the monitoring frameworks, but this is a key. I would dare to say that indeed this is a key. If you have a solid monitoring framework which follows who does what, by which funding, and who is responsible to take the actions, and then you follow it very, first of all, transparently. You need to have it available to the public. so that not only interested institutions but persons with disabilities can open the website and see what is being done for them and by whom and why and how. And then you need to set some targets. You need to set some targets. I can tell you that in the EU strategy, we have set only 2 targets, and we are asking member states by the end of next year, so we gave them 3 years' time to think about it, to set the 2 targets. One is about closing the disability employment gap of persons with and persons without disabilities, and the other one is to close the gap relevant to skills of persons with disabilities. And giving this clear dimension, you have chance to succeed with the strategy. And what is most important, you need to have strong, and we can never stop emphasizing, political will and money put in it. Because political will without proper funding does not guarantee any success, and also all the funding without solid political will does not end with with the results that we all desire. So sounds quite simple, I have to say. Now when I listen myself, sounds like, okay, we have the solution. It's not easy, and it's really the biggest challenge that I do believe all of our societies are facing.
Thank you so much. Mr. Kabiri, you would also like to add? Yes.
I think you have rightly captured points. One lessons I would share based on both at the global and some of the national strategy that we worked with is the 2 things. One is this more politicking. You would hear, if you develop any strategy, no matter how ambitious it is, there would be one level of support that, yes, we of course support it, without meaning it, right? And that is really dangerous, because you would count on them and then you would realize that it's not happening the way you thought. And it is across the board, all level. But the second point, monitoring and evaluation, I completely agree. But how do you really ensure that monitoring and evaluation, the key suggestions are, again, circling back to the programming operation? Because sometimes audit and monitoring and evaluation stands one side, and then programming happen, and then these 2 doesn't meet always. It's not always that automatically it meets. So it's important that you make that link the way it works for your country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kabiri. I think this is really a good topic for exchange. So perhaps this will be a topic for the COSP another year. We could extend the time for this. I let one more question in. I think you are in red over on the right, so please, and then we will finalize.
Yes, hello. Thank you for a wonderful side event. My name is Molly Hermans. I am from First People's Disability Network Australia, as well as Queensland Autism Inclusion. And I wanted to ask the panel, I think this is in the context of a national level, but it would be great to hear more about how disability strategies are being developed in conjunction with other strategies for marginalised populations, and how that intersectionalism is actually being operationalised. So, for example, in Australia, we have Australia's disability strategy, and then we also have what's called the Closing the Gap framework, which is a framework for, advancing the human rights of Indigenous people. And it almost seems like civil society's job to marry those 2 strategies. There is no coordination mechanism within government actually doing that. And I think, Katerina, you were talking about the disability coordinators and the equality coordinators, and the role that they're playing for the EU. So we'd be really interested to hear more about, how different strategies are actually being kind of joined up and speaking to each other.
Thank you for a very relevant question. I think it has been quite developed, both from the UN system's perspective and from European Union, how this thing have been developed. I will be very undemocratic. I'll give you some points from Swedish strategy, where the government has ensured and appointed that, for instance, the the agency working with gender equality and the agency working with children's rights, which are different ones, are actually also very strongly appointed in the strategy. And it's also clarified that should be part of the work to ensure that the perspectives are actually getting together and becoming like a joint venture. And also the work on the Agenda 2030, the development agenda is also very clearly pointed as also like a framework to ensure that the issue of sustainable development, social development, but also obviously environmental, is also a part of the strategy work. So that is how the Swedish government has tried to ensure that this is happening, what you are asking for. Time flies, as we say in Swedish. That's when you have fun. And we have another honorable guest here today, our ambassador, Miss Anna-Karin. I can't remember your name. Yes. So Anna-Karin. Well, we are colleagues. So you have promised to give some final remarks to finalize this seminar. So please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Malin, and thank you to all participants. I think it's been a really full and very interesting discussion today. And as a representative of Sweden, I'm very proud that we have hosted this seminar together with the European Union delegation here in New York and European Disability Forum. So thank you so much to all of those that have put in a lot of efforts into making this event coming through. And I will not try to summarize this discussion. I'll leave that to others to do, but I'll just give you a few reflections after the discussion. I mean, first picking up on, and I want to thank all speakers, of course, because I think it was really interesting and very good remarks. A few things that I picked up from that was the importance of the multi-stakeholder to work not only between member states but also with other stakeholders, not least the civil society. The political will that was, I think, raised by several, but also the political will tied to the possibility and the willingness to provide resources. The monitoring of the implementation of strategies and data was very much raised by many of you, and I think we can say that data has become sort of the new gold in our time, because data is really something that is really key for us working. You mentioned disaggregated data, but also data when it comes to the entire digitalization is something that I think we will need to invest and put a lot of efforts into. So I think it's been, as I said, a fascinating discussion, and also to see that even if strategies are on different levels, international, regional, and national, they interconnect and share features, and they all call for cross-sectoral governance. They also require intersectional approaches that was raised by many, capturing the fact that disabled persons also face different realities depending on their gender, age, ethnicity, etc. A person can never be defined only from one aspect, not by nationality, not by color of skin, not by religion, gender, and of course not defined by a disability. The impact of strategies varies from sector to sector and in different organizations and environments. But it's clear that in order to maximize potential impact, persons with disabilities or their representative organizations have to present and involve themselves in both the development, in the implementation of policy and practice. And I think, Malin, you mentioned nothing about them without them, or nothing about us without us. So I think that's a very important thing to follow. Strategies for inclusion are critical tools for achieving domestic change and for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the Agenda 2030. As you know, Sweden holds the presidency of the Council of the European Union for a couple of more weeks. One priority has been to highlight and promote the EU strategy of rights of persons with disabilities. And today we have talked about the strategy, some of its content and impact on the United Nations. On the 27th June, a full day of event is organized in Brussels, and the event can be followed online via the EU Commission's website. So lastly, I'd like to thank the Commission, the Commissioner, she's not here, but the Commission, and all colleagues in the EU Cooperation, European Disability Forum, UN Women, and all speakers. And thank you, Malin, for taking on excellently and very efficiently, and I think we are right on time, the moderation of this event. So thank you all so much.
Yes, and thank you so much, Ambassador Denström, and thank you everybody for participating, and let's continue the debate outside.